So let's do foursies in here. We want to get back to the math on the M1, M2 for Yet4.0 being the close off on those 4 jokers inside the damn game popping up. Doing the thing, we could hit this 14 hours ago. Fresh little Danger Noodle dropped a marshmallow for us. We got this from a month ago. It's been sitting in the cage for a while. We could just make money on it. Just leave it there. Start putting in our last thesis for tangents. Well, it was tangents, but it was a different type of tangent, or no, it was transformations. That's what it was. And that from a month ago would be part of this class where you start to see the quadrants. Now we could jump right into it, but I want you to remember that little graphing index where he closed that off. So it was like 2 points on here being the bottom line, or this being the rabbit in the pipes. This thing bouncing the hell off over in here, doing its thing, coming up, pinball wizard banging around. You know about why that's exciting. It's good. It's really cool. Quadrants, 2 pi. I'm loading up on the pipes. I'm starting to deal with what I'm looking at and some real stuff, right? Lorenzo's on the optics. Here's a bunny. Figure out that bunny. I got one of these in that pipe. But you see why it's compressed and would be a two-dimensional, when you start, two-dimensional, three-dimensional, four-dimensional object, because it's based in 0 and 1. And those base systems are going to give me some basic quadrants on hot and cold for batteries, the periodic table, lithium, anything that would be a matrix under those ideas for the periodic table, everything I'm throwing at the Class D. As you do, you generally know, we could hit those things. We could. We really could. Well, it's not necessarily I'm talking. What you got to have, again, I like direct contact, not necessarily the demographic of it. Again, this is more realistic of what Fermilab actually looks like. And I'm not saying any of them don't. I'm just watching the dog, doing the thing, tattoo studio, all on the number. It's pretty much a grind. Taruk's coming at me. All that right there. Just some gravity waves from Saturn's ring playing with Anton over here, one of these cowboys on the XAYZs that I'm setting up. This being ZBrush. Inside here is an algorithm set up by YouTube on this system right here. Some common searches that hey, you know what? I like to when I'm chilling at night. One of these are going to get me. I'm pretty sure I might listen to this or this first for a little while. Well, that statement right there is physics. Firstly, did you hit physics? Do you understand physics, son? I mean... Oh, yes! Outstanding. I haven't seen this one yet.
Chrome soft X is better for twirling.
So good.
That's when you twirl. That's when you twirl.
E8 if it need be.
Reviews are in. Free Guy is certified fresh.
Again, that pipe right there gives me that pipe is on this angle right here. Why I looked up there? Yeah, I got a CP paradox wrong. I carry the prime on that indicator, let you know I clicked one of those cells on the program in GPT-3. Hey, buddy.
It's like my tongue hit a baby with a sunrise. Free Guy is the most fun I've had watching a movie all year.
No bubble wrap. You do that. No.
Free Guy. Rated PG.
No,
谢谢上百万数学爱好者关注 3Blue1 Brown 频道。
It's gonna be a problem when I go over there. Two by twos out
Do you
the
have
door,
any textbook
dude.
recommendations? I do. I mean, obviously this is something that depends on what you're trying to learn and, what you're looking for in a given textbook. But a couple that I'm personally pretty fond of, I've got over here. So the first one is something I wish I had had when I was learning things in college in my freshman year, when you learned about multivariable calculus and linear algebra and things like that. So it's called vector algebra.
Again, I'm just sitting on two as a kid.
Vector calculus, linear algebra, and differential forms. A unified approach.
And
it's by John Hubbard and Barbara Hubbard, so sort of a husband-wife pair, which is cute. I think where it succeeds that a lot of other books about similar topics fail is that it does a really good job showing why you're making certain constructions, but also going into the depth of it. So it's not just an engineering book in that you're just talking about how to apply linear algebra. It really is meant for math people and math majors. But at the same time, it doesn't stay too abstract. It actually shows you how to compute things, shows you where they'll be applied. And it goes pretty deep. It gets up to where you
I
can
take
describe
formula I've
Maxwell's
got, I'm
equations
bring
with
them right down to
differential
that
forms.
stone mill.
But even if you're
and
not
start
learning about
having
differential
doing
forms and
graph
things
about
like that,
working
just as a
numbers. Take it
linear
off
algebra
the board,
textbook,
Fed.
just the
Just
1/3
get
of it
rid
that
of
is
it.
that, I
Elon
would
was
pretty
on a
highly
note earlier
recommend.
today about GPT-3.
Another, which is just a total
Which
classic,
blows
it would be
my
a shame
mind.
not to mention this,
Get a program.
is Stephen Strogat's Nonlinear
Warden.
Dynamics and Chaos.
Warden.
Talk to anybody who's read this book, and I can almost guarantee it'll be one of their favorite textbooks.
Grab
It
it.
is
Like I
filled
said,
with
plain
actual
pop out
applications
here.
to
If you get another
chemistry and
one up, it would
biology and
be
things like that.
that
But again,
number
without shying
pop
away
in
from
as
the
a
depth
new
of the
one,
math.
but
Stephen
along
Strogatz is,
the
of course,
course,
very
take
skilled as a communicator.
operator
He's
is
quite well known
very
for that
tight
at this point, and
movements
it shows
as 0
in
and
his
1.
writings. And this is something that's
Bits and
meant for
bytes.
students taking a class. It's not a popular math
Well,
book,
it has
but it almost reads
superposition,
like a popular math
Schrodinger,
book at certain
M1,
points
M2,
in terms of
because
how
the kid's
approachable
gonna
it can be.
diagnose off
Another
of
one
C,
which I've got here is
minus C,
not really
plus
a
C,
textbook per se,
all the way up to
but
1 and 0.
you could treat it
And
that way
then
if you
it
wanted
does
to
the
think
X
of,
and
I don't
Y's
know,
on
if there was a
any kind you
course
want.
about clever
But
proofs
there's
out there, this should
some
probably
Bell's
be one of the
equality,
texts in
Bernoulli's
there. But it's called
exclusionary.
Proofs from the Book,
So
which is an
those
allusion to a
tight
certain quote from
indexes
Paul
give
Erdős
me-
where he was
you
talking
know
about
where I'm
how
at? Yeah.
there's some proofs out there. Now, what did he say? He said, you don't have to believe in God, but you do have to believe in the book.
So I
And
want
there's some
M1,
proofs
M2,
out there where
like,
when you
so
read
this
them, you
quantum
realize that they
though,
came
I'm
from
in
the
the
book.
after index sometimes
And
when
even
I
if it's a little bit silly to
review
talk about,
these,
there being the
4
best proof for
pi
something or something that is
over
almost
2 on
deified
well,
in terms
this
of its
can turn into
perfection.
a
What
twist
they tried to
with
do
2
with
hits
this
from
was
where I landed.
compile
I
a
was just
list
hitting
of some of the
3.
proofs out there
1,
that
2, 3,
could be considered
it
to
would
come
be-
from the book. And they're really clever. It's really pleasing. And while it covers
So
all sorts of
Dustin
different
has
topics, there's a
numbers
little bit
off
of a
goes- well,
bent towards
it's a
discrete math
psychology
and graph theory.
problem,
So
really.
if you're into those
Tightest
kinds of things,
index
it's
of
just
most
filled with really nice
practicality
examples.
of graphing
And the other one
it,
I've got here,
did you hit
also
that number?
not really like a
Like
textbook
Black
in the
Body
sense
for
that I could
Ray
imagine
Light
as being
Genius.
assigned in a class. It's just sort of weirder.
And
It's
then,
almost a genre
well,
of its own.
Space-Time did it good,
Is
but
the
they
Cauchy
spaced it out
Schwartz
too long.
master class.
My
So,
page
as you may well know, the
on
idea of
it.
a master class is something where, usually in the arts, if you have someone
It can
who's
take 4 or
striving
5
towards
minutes.
excellence
Go.
in that field,
Just-
maybe you're a violin player and you're really striving towards excellence. A master class would be something where you've really worked up a
So,
particular
from-
skill set and maybe a particular piece, and you get extremely pointed
Alright,
advice
this
and
in one
criticism
class
from a
takes
given expert.
a whole class.
And the idea of framing math in that way, I think, is kind of
Fundamental analysis.
I don't know, it's
Or,
thought-provoking.
functional
But
analysis.
this is a really good
MIT
foundation
class,
for
this was his
analysis,
board,
but
pull it
the kind
down,
of problem
pop it
solving
up
that goes into
between those
analysis,
lines.
and not just learning certain inequalities like
Behind those
Cauchy-Schwartz or the arithmetic mean
You're gonna
geometric mean or
Fermi
leveraging
Labs,
convexity in clever ways, rather than just
spin
telling you what they are.
correction,
It really tries to
all
give you this
on
sense of how you can use them to
scale
solve problems or
some
build
basic
those
system.
instincts for
Now,
how you use them
it
to
is
solve
number
problems.
theory. I bring up
And that's just
Brahmins.
4. There's countless different textbooks I
bring up
could
Brahmins as a
recommend,
note,
but
'cause
sometimes
we go
too many
back to it. We're gonna
recommendations
hit
tend
back
to
to
water
M1
down the ones
on
that
the
you have
system,
given.
break down different spins.
How do you
call it the
avoid being
matrix under that.
frustrated by
We have a
mathematical
common line.
textbooks?
That line,
How do you read
physics,
math texts
ball and
faster?
air, ball and
I think this is a question a lot of us
water,
can
ball and
resonate with,
antimony
because we
acid.
all know that feeling when you're
Well,
reading
it
a
becomes
textbook or paper,
useful later.
whatever it
Air,
is, and you find yourself going over the same page maybe
sulfuric
7 different
acid,
times.
whatever
You're
ramps
kind
it
of
up,
squinting
the
your eyes and banging your head against it, and whatever
temperature
it's saying is
index
just not
on-
sinking in.
on
So
what the
definitely, if that's the
standards
case, the correct thing to do is to
Let's
not
have
try to read that
electromagnetism.
page an
There's a
8th
few
time. Something else is going on.
classes
And
of
one possibility is
whole
that
timelines
it's just not an
in
author
that
that you resonate
topology
with.
problem
There
of
might be
the
another
chessboard.
book about the
Because I'm
same
gonna break
topic
down
written
again
by
in
someone
that
who you do
curve,
resonate with.
'cause
So taking the time
had
to
hard line,
explore which
and in there,
different
you-
approaches to a topic seem to match with you, I think can be
Don't you look at
important.
that one very
So for
closely.
example,
I
I
have a land
really
nav
enjoy
map,
anything that
and I have
Vladimir
some
Arnold
particles
has
and
written.
points. Now,
If I see that there's a given topic, there's multiple
in
books on classical
that
mechanics, and I
changes
see that Arnold has written one, I'm probably going to resonate with that in a certain
for
way.
any
So that
scale,
might be
'cause
what I go
I wanna
to
just
first
do
to get an
one.
instinct
It's
for
still
it.
square.
Another possibility,
in a
though, if you're
5
at
by
that
5.
point when you're banging your head against it,
But
is
this
that there's
one
a hidden
goes
prerequisite.
6
There's
and a half,
something
7, or
that
5
the author
by
is
8.
assuming. It's
This
not
is a 5 by
entirely
8 piece
clear
of paper,
that they are assuming
graph
that.
every single
So
page,
one example
have
here
the
would be
quarter-inch line
a lot of modern
inside
math
here,
texts
so it keeps me
assume
all
that
on
you're
scale.
familiar with
I
set
get my
theory, or
X's
rather, they
down.
assume that you're
That's
familiar
all
with the
on the base
language of
row.
set theory and some of the
Which is base row,
instincts
first
that come
row,
about from
black
cardinality
body
and things like
thing,
that.
number of
And if that's something you're
electromagnetism
uncomfortable
mentions
with,
in that
or
area.
if some of the language doesn't
because
make
the preacher
sense,
stepped in,
you would
or
find yourself yourself
Gordon
just
over
banging
here.
your head against that wall many times. Another common one for people who are just
The
starting
grocery
college
store
is the
clerk
whole
named
premise
Karen,
of how
buddy.
certain math fields are constructed, where you start off with axioms and you're
Photon-
constructing
well,
lemmas
this
and
is
theorems, and that
Penrose's
those are ultimately
photon
going to be used
version.
for
Well, I
solving
did
problems
some
like 5
spin
chapters down the
direction
road,
early,
and you kind of
or on the
swallow
line.
this pill
X.
of
You can do it early
abstraction
and
in order
after.
to get to
Click.
that reward later.
It started.
Because what it means
Click.
is if you are thinking of it like a high school
0
textbook,
to 1.
something like
Big
a calculus
bang.
book that's
Standards
telling you how to
on
solve a
lens
problem then and there,
versions right
and
now
putting off the formalisms
of
until later.
Hawking dark.
It makes it really confusing
So-
to just plow through those axioms and not necessarily
So
understand
spin direction
why or
needed
where
a
they come
matrix,
from.
needed a school line.
And if you
gotta
are in
call
that
it
kind
rock.
of head-banging
Otherwise,
state
bug,
on a given
0, 1.
page, one thing I might suggest is looking up
So,
lectures on that
early
particular
indexes-
topic. Math can sometimes be much more of an oral tradition than we give it
Code.
credit for.
Now, like I said, I'm
And
gonna
just
go
hearing someone talk
A,
about
O
certain topics
on
and what they
pins
choose to
to the
emphasize,
8-bit.
or when they brush aside something and say, oh,
I
this
think it
isn't really
has
important,
9
that's just
pins.
details. But the
It might
core
have
of this
6
proof
it
comes
does
from
have
here.
8
All of that
pins, I do believe.
information
On it, but anyways,
sometimes gets communicated
you can
in
crush
the
that
way that
down
it's
to
spoken in a
having
lecture,
extra
rather than any way that
800
it's written.
negative
A good textbook
816
author can write it
16
that way,
million.
but it tends to come through in lectures
Now,
a little bit more easily
That's on the
sometimes.
X. If I knew it
How
was
can I tell
early
whether
and
I
cut
am
down
not
hedging,
gifted enough,
so
or
you
if it's
make
just
the
that a
earliest
textbook
step
is
that's
poorly
on
written?
angle of an axiom by programming. Right,
Hey,
so
when
that
I was a kid,
programming
our
unit
goal
starts
had
with the
one
pins.
engine.
The pins
Me.
going to correlate to that blinkety light doing Ben Eater's work. First
Up to 6,000 pounds towing in the all-new
Bell.
ruggedly redesigned 2022
Quality
Nissan
inequality of the
Pathfinder.
computer, otherwise going to be an 83 test on just putting the AR-15 together and remember where all the pieces are, where and go.
In 10 days.
You know, I mean, so that's some basic matrices. I can still scale from the house, man. You know, it's what's in the pipes, coming back with Leonard stuff on certain axes of figuring out that math
Okay, so a
problem
couple
you
things
put
to
into
unpack
it.
there. I mean, first of all, it is the case that some
Now,
textbooks are poorly
again, you're gonna
written,
get the
so
rabbit.
when you're
You're gonna get
confused,
the
you're
rabbit
not
up
exactly
top,
to
you're gonna get
blame.
the rabbit in
But the
this,
whole
and it's
premise of it being a
changing
matter of
all
being
its
gifted or not
axes
gifted,
all over
that
like a
I would try to put
neutrino,
out of your head
proton,
and say
neutron,
what's
pop,
relevant for understanding math is if you have experience with
So
it or
M1,
not.
M2,
And when you look at the people around you, where
electron,
some seem to be really
virtual
good at it, just they
that's
get it much
fine.
more quickly,
It's good.
and it
You're
comes
gonna need some
across almost like they
antimatter
have
in
this
your
innate genetic advantage for math. Almost always it's because they have just a deeper set of experience,
Go
more
back to
hours
it.
spent
So
contemplating the
little
relative
ramp
kinds
up,
of
getting
problems
the EM
associated
fields.
with that.
It's gonna do
And
that.
it's not a
Neutron
matter of
star,
something
neutron star,
innate that if you
calculus
don't have
teacher,
it then,
snake
you're not able to
handler,
get ever.
church.
And anytime these
Baker,
sort of nature
marshmallow
versus nurture
factory,
discussions come
M1 and
about
M2,
over whether
you don't know
mathematical
if they're
talent
relative to
is something
another
that is
or
learned over
of the
time, or if
profession
there's
that's necessary
something that's
for
inbuilt in
organizational
certain people that
filters
gives them an
can be in a
advantage.
forward position,
People will bring in these
get in front
examples
of it.
like
That's
John
the
von Neumann or
trajectories
Terence Tao,
of
where it
different
seems like some people
differentials.
really do
M1,
start
M2.
off with a different kind of advantage, or their brain really seems to work in a different way. And maybe those are actual exceptions. Maybe there is some innateness. I can't say for sure. But by and
Well,
large, to a first order or even second order approximation,
chess
if
problem.
you assume everything is based on the
I start
history that
you
you
on
have with the subject,
E4
then when you're asking
to
a question
E2,
like this on
if
am I
that is
gifted
calculus,
enough for this
and I
textbook,
hit,
or is it, is it poorly
you got
written?
Magnus over here.
Instead, I would try to frame it as, do I have the preparation needed for it? Have I learned some of those hidden prerequisites that are in here?
So I don't
or
want to
when
turn
one of my
Magnus.
peers seems to be going really quickly
gonna
with it,
destroy me on the
what is their
chessboard
history
with
exactly? Did they
programmer.
do a lot of
Gonna
contest
destroy
math
it.
and they're
You
solving
seen
problems
Ben
more
Eater?
quickly?
All
Did
right.
they take a course that you didn't take?
He's out there
Do they
pounding
go
rock,
to the
getting
office
headstone
hours of the
boss.
professor a
Just
little bit
no.
more and get some of
I
those
think some of the
subtler
numbers
cues
here-
that come from in-person discussions that don't come out through the text? If
Well,
you really banish
it's-
the idea
it's
of that
almost
person being
known, but not
gifted
known,
and instead
then
think
I'm
of it
right
as
there
them being
back into the
prepared,
spin direction,
then you can actually
FN
do something about
to
it.
that.
You can try to match that preparation. When you make videos, do you talk
don't
about
know,
topics
because
that
there was
you're
a lot
already
of
most
them that
familiar
did
with?
it.
Or do you pick a topic and then
Time you
learn
need
more about it?
conquest. It's like what really
it
got wrong
depends.
here.
I would say that
is
the
the
process for making a
Masons.
video is not so much that I start and say, now what will the topic be?
Now
And
what
then
will
begin
the topic
researching
be
it
when I
or
graph
drawing on
any
knowledge
train
that I
problem,
already
any
had.
trig problem? What do you see?
Instead, the research
X
phase is
equals
something
square
that's
root of
much more
t.
ambient. I just try to learn math,
I see
reading
a
in the
graph
mornings and the
boss.
evenings and
What-
things like
what's
that.
out here right
in a way
now,
that's not
because I'll take
necessarily
the
targeted towards
limit
videos,
0.
but in the back
Like
of my
this,
mind,
where's
I'm
that
kind
tree
of
right there?
keeping
In
notes on what might be a
superposition,
good video
shows linear
topic.
across the board. I want
And
to
if
stop
something
the clock,
does
just
seem like
do
it's
that
there
one
and I
on that
learn it
one.
a little bit
I'm
more
not
and I
gonna
feel
be
like there's a
banging your
good
wife
angle
while
on
I'm
it,
doing this.
then maybe,
No, that's a
a
joke
year
I use
later,
over there
I end up
about,
getting to
hey,
that
I'm
particular
smoked,
topic
I'm
and I've
tore
built
up
up somewhat
my
of a history with
timeline
it by
now,
that point.
sharps.
So in
You
that
have something
sense,
to add.
by the time I'm making a
I'm
video on
very
something,
willing
it's
to
usually
understand
something I
where Jupiter's
have a
position
decent
might be
history
right
with.
now,
I
using
I
some of
honestly
the-
can't think of any times that I've just started to make a video and began the research at that point.
And like I
if
said,
right
it was
now I was
fine,
going to sit
'cause
down and
if
say I
he's
want to
got
talk about fluid
23
mechanics or something I'm
in
not too
one
familiar
day,
with
and
the
or-
intimate
and I
details
have
of.
none, and
I suspect that
forever.
just wouldn't be a great video, or there's other people who are going to make a better version of that video.
I'm going to pick up on it. Try
What's
to
the
get my
story
nickel,
behind
turn
how
it
the
over,
pie
get
creatures
jack-
were created?
Get the necklace. Want to see my necklace?
Okay, so very early on, I think one
Got
of the
a pearl
first
inside.
videos that went on the channel,
And
I was talking about a
house
proof of Euler's
being
formula, the
Bernoulli.
V minus E plus F equals 2. Actually, it was a proof.
The house
It was a proof that I first saw in this book. It was really clever. I really loved the approach that it
M1
took.
and M2 is that
And the
pipe
whole idea
crumps the house,
involved
and then
thinking of the
windage that
spanning
pulls the
tree of a
vacuum out, and
planar
that is
graph.
the equation.
So you've got some kind of
shrunk
graph
it
you can
down
draw in the plane, and
just
you want
to
to have
making it fit
a set of
inside
edges
here.
such
And
that
I
if you
kinda
start from any
caught
one
on
node,
that
you're able
index
to walk
X and
to any of those
Y,
other
and
edges.
oh,
That's kind of a
you can
natural
cut
thing
that down
to
into, like,
literally talk about
and even
walking
though
and stepping
the
across it.
art is
But in particular, I wanted some notion of a
axiom
character
into scale,
in this world
it
because
actually
it also talks
ZBrush the
about
devil out of
the
this thing,
proof
man.
also
I'll make
talks
any
about a dual graph
symbol
where
I
you
need.
think of the faces that this planar graph cuts the plane into as nodes of a different
Well, like I
graph,
said,
a
it's going to
different
hydrogen
structure
helium,
that has
and
some notion
therefore
of
it's going to
connection.
Fermilab.
And the connection between faces are just also the edges of the graph. And the whole proof comes down to thinking of a spanning
am I
tree
looking at
in
the
the
top
original
of the-
graph and a spanning tree in the dual graph. And so I wanted something
From the
where you
top?
have one kind of character in
Or
one world
am
walking
I
on the
looking
normal
at a
nodes,
black
and then
hole?
another character
Honestly,
in the other
in-
walking on these dual nodes to give it
Internally
its
inside
certain,
here, again, you're looking at
I don't know, a
backwards,
visceral
but it
sense
doesn't
of the
matter.
back and
It
forth.
doesn't matter.
And I
Again,
think
you know
because the
that one,
animations were
because
so
it would
primitive
be-
at that time,
Ooh.
and the only real things that I was drawing were just geometric shapes or mathematical symbols.
Wow. Being
I don't know.
all
I think I was just
inside
looking at
there.
mathematical symbols and thinking which one of these could actually
I'm
walk along a graph, and
Like I
the
said,
pi
this
symbol just
isn't
has some
this, though.
legs.
Like I said, there's
And the
still
original designs were pretty
practical-
janky.
you have to
If I look
feed
back
it.
at the
It's
old
like
Pi
it has to
creatures, it's a
have
little bit
bunny on
jarring
there. I
in
mean,
contrast to
if-
what I ended up
because you would
designing
get
later on.
Zeused in
But it
the
was clear then
M1
that there was a
M2,
value to having some
Prometheus,
sort
we
of
have the
quirky and
Olympics,
kind of
it's
cute
kinda in the
character
middle, it's stupid,
in these
it's
math
crazy,
lessons.
it's upside
Because I
down.
do think actually having
Guns Rose, like,
character
it's a
in some
vacuum.
capacity expressing
like,
emotion
what?
in response
3D?
to mathematical results is pedagogically beneficial. It's not just good for the,
But the
you know,
kids can't,
entertainment
'cause I'm
aspect
here
of
to
it,
give a thesis
but
on
to emphasize
45
which
minutes of
results are
explaining what
actually
a thesis
important,
is for
or
45
when
minutes.
it's okay to be confused, and all of this sort
Tough
of
thing to
thing.
do to make
Having
money on that.
some kind
You
of
just do
emotive
that and get
character
old.
matters. I actually wish that math papers and math textbooks were written
M1, M2,
where you have some kind of
between
emoji
geodesics
or
of
at least an emotive character responding to the things
trajectory.
going on in the margins and emphasizing that more
early in
expressive quality
it
that
looks
the
easy
thing
and
that
it
comes
is
across in
beautiful.
lectures but doesn't come across in
it-
textbooks often. I think you could actually communicate
what I
some of that
did would be
subtlety if people would just draw
program. I
little
would
cartoons in the
be
margins now and then.
in topology.
What made you develop the Manum
photons.
package,
It
and how do you
actually
feel about
twisted
Manum
like that,
being
and
used
I
by more
housed it
people?
internally the pipes.
Well, originally it was just a
Because
coding
that's
project. I mean, the channel didn't
M1
even
to
exist, and I
M2.
was just looking
It's like,
for
I'm
something
trying
to
to
do that
emulate that
was,
standard because
I don't know, a playful creation
the
of my own
number on
in the
that
vein of
puppy?
creating
Are
math
you kidding me?
illustrations. And in particular, I think I was a little frustrated by how a lot of default
Crystal
math
theories inside
illustration
there.
software
And again, this being done
centers
is
on
a
graphing
tool
and the idea of
so that
representing
you
a
can
function as a
ramp
graph.
up
And I was
what
thinking,
this
there's a lot
is.
of other ways that we represent
Right.
functions.
So,
You could talk
that's
about
my
a domain
point
coloring or a
on
vector
NTF
field,
blockchain,
or
and
in
believe me,
particular,
I'd
like
be all
transformations,
over it
letting
if it
movement
was
over time
at the bar,
indicate
at
what the
the
connection
bar.
between inputs and outputs is. And there were a couple topics I wanted to explain or given talks or tutoring sessions and things like that,
So,
which
flatten it
lent
out
themselves to a
on
description in terms of
on it
transformations, things like
become
complex
this, but
analysis,
it's
or
first, second,
the very
third,
first video that I
because that's
did
how
was
we have to
about
describe it mathematically.
kind of thinking of e to the pi I in terms
E to
of
the
group
pi
theory
I.
and translations between
E
an additive action of
equal
sliding
pi
and a
I,
multiplicative action of
right?
stretching and
Because
rotating.
It does.
All of
M1
that
and
stuff really
M2
lends itself
across the
to
board,
non-graphical
IH.
understandings
It is
of
the
functions.
irrational,
So I think maybe that was in the back of my
smallest
mind.
distance to get a
You know, like a lot of
computer-programmed
people out there who
graph
make
this
math
certain way. That's why
illustrations, having
Leonard
something that was just
earlier.
my own and built as my own
It
thing,
was,
it's kind of irrational on the one hand because there's so
on
many
Trig
other tools
14.
that do things really well. I could have engaged
M1
with
and
the
M2,
Python
I
plugins to
should be able to get
Blender
that
or just built it all on
M1,
Mathematica or
M2,
something.
Maybe it's in
But there is a
three-phase
benefit
motor.
once you know how
I get
everything
the
works for
but it's
yourself.
not
That you can just
teaching
create new stuff,
which graphs
and
are
you have that kind of
useful,
ownership to
because
tear
there's
up the
sectors
guts
of
of it
graphs,
and make the
and
new
they're
thing
not
that you
clean.
want. So you're not
M1 and
limited by the
M2.
constraints of the tool. So for me, the advantage of
well,
Manum
you're actually doing
usually has nothing to do
225,
with what it's
buddy.
capable
You're
of
on
doing
11
in a
Bravo.
given moment,
You're-
but it's instead my own relationship with is such that if I need a new thing created, you know, the first time I was ever making a video about a fractal, to write stuff that lets it make fractals. Or, I don't know, when I was doing the Fourier series animations, and I wanted a particular style for how the rotating vectors would look, and kind of zooming in and having a camera pan to follow it. All
Right,
of that
I'm
is where I
jumping
have the
around
most
right
fun,
here.
when I'm creating something new for a particular video,
Between
and
me
being
and
able
you.
to dig into the guts of a tool, because I built it, and I know how everything works in it. That's sort of where I find the
That's the
advantage.
pro, like I said. Well, when you get
and to
into
the second part of the
that's
question
a
about how do I
nice,
feel
tight
about
way
Manum
to
being used by
begin
more
the
people,
M1 murder
I mean,
button.
kind of
It is
mixed,
X,
to be
Y, and
honest.
dialogue.
I think it's awesome
you
if
seen
people can
button?
find it useful.
Like,
And there is a
all right,
smile
first,
that's brought to my
no,
face when I see
green,
people making
out
incredible
the
things.
gate,
There's a
droid,
YouTube channel
you
called
have to figure
Reducible
out
who makes some really great
YouTube.
videos. VCubing X
This is
also
what you
does
got,
so.
sitting
with
out
it.
here having
You know, I've
nothing.
seen Manum show up
So
in
just to click it
Veritasium,
out,
and
figure
that
out,
sort
oh,
of brought a smile
samples
to
are
my
in here
face.
to
I was looking through Bilibili and
Yeah,
noticed
you're
a
gonna
good
click
number of Manum videos there.
everything,
So one
everything.
that
And you
kind
know
of
what
built
that
on
means
top
to
of
you?
it to do data
Nothing.
visualizations and
Our
had an
new
extension of the
muse.
package that
It's
sort of
like
caught
new
my eye.
Pokemon out here
But in all
being
of these
the
cases,
on that
it's a little
45
bit funny because
lens,
the
'cause
thing I was just talking about, where my
it
own
would,
relationship with
'cause
it is
I
the
have to explain
advantage
it
that
in
I find,
general.
where because it's something that I built,
means
it's something that I feel I can
black and white
extend
inside
very
it. So you take
seamlessly.
that
You know, if
music
someone else
symbol,
is playing with
violin
it,
playing,
I sometimes worry
and
that it's
you
just a worse version of some
put
other
it
tools
on a
out there.
different version on
Now,
what
to be
that
fair,
is.
that has changed a lot thanks to
But
the
is
Manum
it
community.
practically
So
on the graph
there's
back
people who
sectors?
took what I wrote and tried to make it a lot more
Mathematically,
user-friendly,
graphing
and I think
has a high
succeeded
return.
in that. And, you know,
the
it's
stone
getting
mill,
better every
especially
day.
if you can
These days
adjust
they're
the
incorporating
M2
some of the
for some
OpenGL stuff
windage
that I
on
wrote into my
angles
version into theirs. So
of,
soon it should just be strictly better,
marshmallow out here.
in addition to being easier to work with. And yeah, when people use that to make stuff
Free-
that
fair
feels like it
usage on
needed a
intellectual
programmatic
property is a
animation,
math
you know, it
problem,
leverages
because
loops
it
and
gets you to the
abstraction in
point
some
where
way,
you can do it
it
here
makes me
about
pretty
the
happy.
cases.
Where I get a little
Roe
bit
v.
worried
Wade,
is if
the
I see
Board of
people use it in a
Education.
way that feels like you really didn't need programmatic animations. And I'm a
Warm,
total
fuzzy
hypocrite
feeling
here,
inside.
because given that I do pretty much all of my stuff in Manum, that means that there's a number of scenes that probably didn't need to be made in it, but I was just in the middle of a workflow where I was in Manum anyway because of some other
this
illustrations I
becomes
was
really
doing.
Larry and
So
Larry
if it's just
clocking in
manipulating
day after
text on
day,
screen,
day
it's like I
after
might as well
day,
just do it with
and then
this.
the saw
But if I
breaks or
see someone else
somebody-
use it only for that,
Oh!
only to like write equations and
Oh!
manipulate it, I don't know. I kind of feel like they should make sure they've explored the full
Be on
spacing
the
tools
dock with
before
Union
they
Boss or
dive into
Salted.
that one in
Now,
particular.
Sharps that for
I
me,
like that there's a
would you?
bathtub
What
in the
is the
hotel
best
I'm at right
index
now.
over
I
those
can give
guys?
you
This,
named
this is
Silk.
what the human body will do.
Normally I
Let's
don't
go
sit
over
at home
to
with
Buds
Silk in the tub
and
like
Jocko
in the 1800s.
talking about the math problem with somebody eating dinner. What are they waiting for? They're waiting
It's
for
nice to
everybody to
be
leave
back
so
in a
they can quit.
hotel again. I
Not even
love
on mission,
it.
is on a
Who's ever
system,
called
on a
it
thing.
like
I'm using
picking
the
up
reference
ice
for the
cubes with
Supreme Court
tongs,
case
like
saying
you
that's
come
why
right in.
that's okay to
Open it
discriminate
up
against the
and have
standard
myself
on the
a drink.
graphing because
This
the
room is
result
not
on the
mine.
long end is
I'm not
through
responsible for
timelines and
cleaning
not
it
paying
up.
attention
I
to
can throw
graphing
my
on
clothes
those
on the
indexes
floor.
across the
I can
board.
pile my towels up. Who cares, right? You're not.
How deep are we?
How do you train problem-solving
16?
skills?
All right, hold on.
Well, you know, the cliche